In the quiet suburbs, where life seemed predictable and routines ruled, a man made a decision that sent ripples through his world. One night, without a word of warning, he packed his bags, left his wife, and disappeared into the unknown. To the neighbors, it was just another broken family story. But what no one expected was what his wife would do next, and the extraordinary secret she would return with years later. She had every reason to give up, every reason to let bitterness consume her. But instead, she chose a different path, one filled with determination, sacrifice, and a touch of mystery. And when she came back, she wasn't alone. By her side was a child, one whose talent and brilliance defied all expectations. This young prodigy didn't just inspire awe, they began to change the lives of everyone around them, including the man who had walked away. What happened in those missing years? How did this mother and child forge a bond so strong and transformative? And what did it take for the past to collide with the future in a way no one could have foreseen? Stay tuned, because this is the story of heartbreak, resilience, and a twist you'll never see coming. The years that followed his departure were a blur of heartache for her. Every day felt like a struggle, not just to survive, but to find a sense of purpose in the wake of the life she had once known. She had always been the quiet, steady one, content to live in the background, while her husband chased his ambitions. Now she was forced to take on roles she never imagined, juggling the demands of everyday life with the pressure of raising a child on her own. At first, it was just about survival. The house, once a warm home full of laughter, now felt cold and empty. She spent sleepless nights wondering what went wrong, what she had missed. She thought back to their early days, when everything had seemed perfect. How could someone who had once pledged his love and devotion walk away so easily? But as time passed, her heartache transformed into something else, strength. She had to. For the sake of her child, she couldn't afford to be weak. There was a fire inside her, a determination that she hadn't known she was capable of. She refused to let life break her completely. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about thriving, building a future, even if it meant doing it alone. The child, though, was different. From the moment they could walk, they seemed to possess a natural ability to learn, to understand things well beyond their years. She wasn't sure how it happened, how one small person could come into the world and change everything, but the signs were undeniable. They had a gift. It was clear, even when they were just a toddler, that they weren't like other children. And as the years went on, their brilliance only grew. School couldn't contain them. Teachers were astounded by their ability to grasp complex subjects, to solve problems no one else could. But it wasn't just academic success that set them apart, it was the way they viewed the world. They saw things differently, noticed the connections between ideas that others missed. It was like they had a special lens through which they could interpret the world around them. The neighborhood watched, puzzled and amazed. People talked behind closed doors. Some were in awe, others in disbelief, but everyone knew one thing. This child was destined for something extraordinary, and despite everything that had happened, she couldn't help but feel a spark of hope again, a sense that maybe, just maybe, this would be enough to make her life feel whole again. But even as the child began to shine, the question of the man's absence loomed large. He had left without explanation, and though she had never wanted to track him down, there was always a part of her that wondered why. Did he even think of her? Of them? Was he happy? Did he ever regret walking away? And if he did, would he ever come back? She had learned to move on, to let go of the past. But when she returned to the place they once called home with a child who seemed to have the power to change lives, it felt like unfinished business. It felt like destiny was pushing her to confront the ghost of her past, whether she was ready for it or not. And then, As if the universe itself had conspired to bring everything full circle, there he was. One day, out of nowhere, he showed up on her doorstep. There was no apology, no explanation, just the stunned look on his face when he saw them. The child standing there, a living testament to everything he had walked away from. The years had passed, but the weight of the past seemed to hang in the air, heavy and unresolved. He had changed. His appearance was older, grayer, and there was a weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. But it wasn't just his appearance that had changed, it was his whole demeanor. He seemed unsure, hesitant, almost like he wasn't sure how to face the family he had abandoned. At first, he said nothing. He just stood there, looking at them, at her, at the child, trying to understand what had happened in the years he had been gone. But his silence spoke volumes. It was as if he wanted to say something, but he didn't know where to begin. She stood in the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. There was so much she wanted to say to him, so much anger, so much hurt, but the child was there, looking up at the man who had once been a stranger in their lives. The child didn't flinch, didn't show any sign of emotion. It was as if they already knew the man was part of their story, even though they had never met. "What are you doing here?" she finally asked, her voice quiet but firm. It was the question that had haunted her for years. What had brought him back? What did he want now? He looked at her, his gaze shifting between the two of them. And for a moment, it seemed like he might break down. But then, he cleared his throat and said something that neither of them expected. "I've been watching," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been watching from afar, seeing what you've both done. And I didn't realize, didn't understand what I was leaving behind. I thought I was making the right choice, but I was wrong. I see now that you've built something incredible, and I want to be part of it." The words hung in the air, but they didn't bring the relief she thought they would. In fact, they only made the situation more complicated. She felt a flood of emotions, anger, disbelief, confusion flooding her all at once. How could he think he could just walk back into their lives like nothing had happened? Like he could erase the pain, the years of struggle? But there was more. The child. They stood there, watching him, their face unreadable. Something had shifted in their eyes, a quiet recognition that no one else seemed to understand. As much as the man's return was a shock, there was something else in the air, a feeling that this was more than just a reunion. This was the beginning of something else entirely. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, something extraordinary happened. The child spoke, their voice calm and steady, as if they had been waiting for this moment their entire life. They looked at the man with the kind of intensity that only someone with a deep understanding of the world could have. "You didn't just leave her," they said, their words cutting through the silence. "You left all of us, and now you want to come back? Do you think you can just fix things? That you can change what happened?" The man stood frozen, unable to respond, while she too was left in stunned silence. The child's words had pierced right through the heart of the matter. They understood something that neither she nor he could put into words. They knew the weight of abandonment, of broken promises, in a way that no one else could. The questions now lingered in the air, unanswered. Could this broken family ever be whole again? Could the man ever redeem himself in the eyes of the child? And what would it mean for all of them to move forward, knowing that the past could never truly be erased? As the man stood there, waiting for a response, the air seemed thick with unspoken truths. The tension was unbearable. And just as it seemed like the story was about to unfold in one direction, everything shifted again unpredictably, and without warning the silence between them stretched on, a heavy pause filled with unspoken emotions and memories, too tangled to unravel in one moment. The man's shoulders slumped under the weight of the child's words. He didn't try to defend himself, didn't rush to explain. Instead, he lowered his gaze, as if the truth of what he had done, what he had left behind, was finally settling over him. She watched him closely, trying to gauge his intentions. Was this remorse genuine? Or was it just guilt now that he saw what they had become without him? She couldn't decide, and that uncertainty kept her from saying what she truly felt. There were years of pain she had carried, years of learning to let go. Now, standing there, all of it threatened to surface. The child, however, was steady. They looked at him with the wisdom and clarity that had always made her marvel. They weren't angry, at least, not in the way she had expected. Their words carried weight, but there was no malice. It was almost as if they were testing him, seeing if he could rise to the moment. "You can't undo what's been done," the child continued, their voice calm but unyielding. "But if you want to be here now, it has to mean something. It can't just be for you." The man finally raised his head, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen in him before: humility. "I know I don't deserve a second chance," he said quietly. "I can't go back and change what I did, no matter how much I wish I could. But I want to try to be here, to support you both in whatever way you'll let me." She felt her throat tighten. The words sounded sincere, but the scars of the past weren't so easily soothed. Still, she couldn't deny the small flicker of something inside her, a hope she didn't want to admit. Could people really change? Could he? The child glanced at her, their expression thoughtful. It was a look she had come to recognize, the way they seemed to process everything on a level far beyond their years. They weren't going to decide this alone. This was about both of them. "What do you think?" the child asked, turning to her. Their question caught her off guard. She hadn't expected to be put on the spot, not like this. But she knew the answer couldn't wait. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I think, if you're serious about this, it's going to take time. It's not just about showing up now, it's about proving that you mean it. And I can't promise I'll ever forget what happened. But for their sake," she said, glancing at the child, "I'm willing to try." The man nodded slowly, his expression filled with relief and something that looked like gratitude. He didn't push for more, didn't try to force his way in. Instead, he simply said, "Thank you." What followed wasn't easy. The days turned into weeks, and the fragile dynamic between them took time to settle. He didn't move back into their lives overnight, and she made it clear that trust would have to be earned. He started small, showing up for the child's milestones, helping where he could, and proving that he was willing to put in the effort to repair the damage he had caused. The child, meanwhile, seemed to navigate the situation with a grace that amazed her. They didn't hold grudges, but they also didn't let him off the hook. They asked hard questions about why he had left, what he had done with the years he had been gone. And while the answers weren't always easy to hear, the honesty seemed to pave the way for something new. For her, the process was slower. She had spent so long building a life without him, learning to stand on her own 2 feet. Letting him back in felt like walking a tightrope, balancing between hope and fear. There were moments of tension, moments when old wounds threatened to resurface. But there were also moments of clarity, times when she could see glimpses of the man she had once loved, the man she had believed in before everything fell apart. And then there was the child. Their brilliance continued to shine, drawing attention from people who recognized their potential. Offers came pouring in: scholarships, mentorships, opportunities that could take them to heights no one had imagined. Through it all, she remained their anchor, supporting them while letting them lead the way. The man, too, began to see the child's talent for what it was: a gift, but also a responsibility. He started to show up, not just for the big moments, but for the small ones too: the late-night study sessions, the quiet conversations about dreams and fears. Slowly, he became more than just the man who had left. He became someone they could count on. But even as the pieces began to fall into place, life had one more twist in store. One day, the child came to her with an idea, something bold, something that could change not just their lives, but the lives of countless others. They wanted to create something, to use their gifts to make a difference. And they wanted both of their parents to be part of it. First, she was hesitant. The idea was ambitious, almost too much to take on. But as the child explained their vision, she began to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about the past or even the present. It was about building something for the future, something that could heal the wounds of the past and create a legacy that would last. The man, too, was taken aback by the proposal. But he didn't shy away. For the first time, he seemed to understand what it meant to truly be there, to show up not just for himself, but for something greater. Together, the three of them embarked on this new chapter, each bringing their own strengths to the table. The road wasn't easy, and there were moments when the past threatened to pull them back. But through it all, they learned to lean on each other, to trust in the possibility of redemption and growth. In the end, they created something extraordinary, not just in the world, but within themselves. The child's vision came to life, a testament to their brilliance and the love that had carried them through even the darkest times. And for her, there was finally a sense of peace, a feeling that the pain of the past had been transformed into something meaningful. As for the man, he found a sense of purpose he had never known before. He would always carry the weight of what he had done, but he no longer let it define him. Instead, he chose to focus on what he could do now, on the family he had almost lost, but was grateful to have found again. Their story wasn't perfect, and it never would be. Their story wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But it was real, full of heartbreak and healing, mistakes and second chances. And as they stood together, looking toward the future, they knew one thing for certain. Sometimes, the most unexpected journeys lead to the most extraordinary places.